we thank them for their continued support and efforts. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'll tell you, I'm looking at the camera here, but you're all over here. So I'm going to try to keep myself facing forward. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So before we get started, we acknowledge that we gather on the traditional land of the Wahpeton and Dakota people. And these people are here, both past and present, and we, with gratitude, we honor this land itself and the people who stewarded it through generations. We take this land acknowledgement and we take it further as a reminder for us to be good stewards and neighbors of the land that we stand on, in conjunction with the Wahpeton and Dakota people. So thank you so much for that. And thank you again for joining this afternoon. It's beautiful out. My name is Julie Brack. I have the pleasure of being Executive Director of Cradle to Career, and we welcome you to C2C's Community Report Out. In the next hour, you're going to hear who we are, what we do, where we've been in the last year and during COVID, and then how we are moving forward. So you'll also hear about our community and how they're aligning and responding to the needs of children and their families. And before we get too far down the line, I want to take some time to introduce you to the backbone staff that supports the hard work of our network partners. So first we have Kelsey Duffy. She's our Director of Data and Research. And I actually wanted to share with you some big wins that each of our departments have had this year. So Kelsey, in partnership with Nahida Nareen, the data manager, together, they've really been working to make sure that our networks have data that can inform and drive their decision-making. So they've been working with both of our networks around gathering baseline data. In addition to that, they've been working with one of our biggest network partners, Rochester Public Schools, and they've been working on a data warehouse, and it's called CitySpan. It has actually newly been rebranded, but that more on that to come at a later date. But this is a huge win for our community because this really speeds up the ability to assess and look at where our kids are in real time in each of these programs. And it also gives ability for programs to talk to each other around kids who they share. So this is really, really a big win. And we thank Kelsey and Nahida so much for their work in this arena. In addition, Kelsey also has quite a few volunteers that work within data and research, and she has a data and research subcommittee that works to make sure that our evaluation of Cradle to Career as a whole is getting started this year. So that's going to be something really exciting as well, that we can really look at our efforts as a whole and continuously improve as we keep marching toward these shared results that we're all after. In addition to Kelsey, we have Claudia Tabini. She's our Director of Community Engagement. Within community engagement, she houses the facilitation of our networks. She also houses parent engagement, and she also houses communications. And I will tell you that she and Amy, in partnership as our communication specialists, took on a huge project this year. When we started going back and forth between learning environments, we realized that our parents and caregivers needed some more support. And so we put together a program in partnership with our network partners and also with Rochester Public Schools that's called Support Your Local Learner. And Amy really has done a remarkable job of taking the lead on that in partnership with Claudia. And they made sure that prioritized standards from grades kindergarten through third grade in English language arts and math were broken down from from education jargon into just plain language and then translated in Spanish and Somali. And if you haven't seen them, I encourage you to go to our website and check those out. It was a great project and one I think that we're really excited to continue to expand going forward. In addition, Claudia has welcomed Deneen Graham as our parent engagement specialist. And Deneen, has hit the ground running. She's really working to make good relationships with our parents so that, again, we can understand the local story of families and their students. That's what Cradle to Career is really after, is what is happening within our community that we can learn from, that we can take collectively and start to really break down any of those barriers that are within our systems that are holding kids back from their greatest potential. And finally, I have to acknowledge Zeni Ali. She is remarkable. She has been an infrastructure guru throughout this last year, because as you can imagine, this time last year, we were gathering at JEM in person with an open buffet, if you can believe it, and with signs that said no handshake zones. But we weren't wearing masks, but there was hand sanitizer everywhere. And that's what Zeni does. She pays attention to details, and she makes sure that we can make pivots from in-person into Zoom platforms, into Google platforms, and into Teams platforms. And so Zeni really does hold our team together when we think about that infrastructure. So that's the backbone staff, and those are some big wins that we've had over the year from each of our departments. And I am honored to work with each one of these people. The amount of dedication they bring is remarkable. In addition to this dedicated staff, we have a strong leadership table who governs and set directions for our work. This board of 20 plus community leaders is chaired by Erin Sexton and Kathy Nathan, and they join us now to introduce you to the rest of the board. And I will kick it over to Erin.
Great, thank you very much, Julie, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm Erin Sexton. I'm Director of Community Engagement at Mayo Clinic, and I've had the pleasure of being co-chair for the leadership table since we formally came together back in 2018, which seems like yesterday, but now 3 years ago. The leadership table is our governing body for the community-wide collective impact initiative. And together we set the strategic priorities and monitor the results to make sure that we're on track to ensure that children in our community are supported and able to reach their greatest potential. As you can see, we have a strategic blend of education, public, private, and community leaders who give of their time and talent to ensure the success of Cradle to Career. And I'm not going to name all of us today because we will be here longer than I think you all want to be here. But I do want to express our deep gratitude for all of the leadership table members who are involved in helping to guide this important work. But I especially want to call out one particular member today and take a minute to acknowledge Elaine Case, who served as the co-chair with me from 2018 until the end of 2020. As many of you know, Elaine was a driving force behind bringing the Strive Together network model and ultimately Cradle to Career to Rochester. She cares deeply for this community and equally deeply about ensuring kids reach their potential. Without Elaine's passion and leadership, we would not all be sitting here today. We're happy to continue to have Elaine's passion at the leadership table, and really I want to express our great appreciation for her years of service as co-chair. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our new co-chair, Kathy Nathan, who took the co-chair role beginning in January of 2020. So Kathy, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Erin. So as Erin said, I'm Kathy Nathan, co-chair of the Cradle to Career Leadership Table. I'm a member of the Rochester School Board and also the Minnesota PTA Board of Directors. Where we consider where Cradle to Career is today, it's important to remember where we have been. Rotary and the United Way came together to start exploring what the result of education investments have been across our community. Displeased with the results, they partnered with Strive Together, a national nonprofit who has over 65 communities implementing Cradle to Career models across the nation. Strive Together has a theory of action that tracks how well we are creating systems transformation in our community. We are currently a sustaining member, which means as a community, we are gathering the foundation together for a sustainable initiative that is on the right path to change the systems in place, holding students back from reaching their fullest potential. Some of the short-term goals we have in place are to increase parent and student engagement. This is vital so that we are gathering their stories and not guessing about the barriers students and their families face. Racial and educational equity are also central to the work of Cradle to Career. We must break down systems that do not serve all children. We must understand that equitable education starts with examining the systems, creating changes that afford resources and assets to all children when they need them to expand and grow on their individual educational journey. You'll hear about this a lot today: systems change and transformation. At the end of the day, we are not interested in patching holes in broken systems. We are pushing for the system to evolve, to change, and to fuel the imaginations of our future, and to push past potential into excellence. We believe every child can and will succeed if given a fair and equitable system to navigate. We're glad you're here today to hear about our work, and I'll hand it back to Julie.
Oh, thank you so much, Erin, Kathy, and Elaine. This is the power of our community, and this is the power of Cradle to Career. You know, it's really interesting because people still ask, you know, what is it? You know, who are you? What is it that you do? And what we do is we support the work of the network. We support the vision of community leaders. We create an atmosphere in which our network partners can do the best work that they possibly can do. You can move to the next slide, Amy, that would be great. This is a list of who we are. It's not just a staff and it's not just leadership table. We need you all to be part of this journey. And this is the beginning list of 30 plus organizations working to make sure that all kids are ready to succeed when they hit kindergarten doors, and all kids are graduating high school ready for their next step. And we're really excited that as an initiative that we are able to provide that backbone staff to ensure those network partners who are the experts in their programs are able to really work with their children and their families and do this important work. So who are we? We're the community. We're you and we're us. And together we'll make a difference. So what does that kind of look like? Well, it kind of looks sometimes like a mess. So let's talk about that. Next slide, Amy. And you can click forward to, yep. So when we think about a community and all these partners doing this work, oftentimes there's disorder and confusion. There's a lot of partners doing a lot of different work, okay? So what we do at first is we start to identify who are all these individual partners and what is it that they're doing? Well, oftentimes what we see is that they're doing fantastic work, but it's in isolation. So one partner is working with these kids over here, one partner is working with these kids over here. They never talk to find out that maybe they have 3 overlapping kids. So now if we move to the next, we're really thinking about, well, what happens if instead of working in isolation, we work in coordination? And we really start to think about what happens when we align our programs and our data toward a shared result. Well, that's fantastic. But the real power comes with that collective impact, with that coordinated effort. And that's what you're going to hear about today as we get into our panel conversation with the conveners. They've moved from, in the last 2 years, from this disorder and confusion of like, what is it that you do? Why do you do it that way? To truly making a collective impact so that they're hitting the mark. And that's what I'm really excited to talk to you about today, and for you to hear from the conveners that together they're making big strides in their networks to make sure that we are coordinated and collectively impacting the lives of children and their families. And so I'm going to pass it over to Claudia Tabini, our Director of Community Engagement, and she's going to moderate a panel with our conveners. And so next slide, Amy.
Thank you, Julie. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see you here. As Julie mentioned, quite different from last year, but we're glad to be here nonetheless. Let me introduce you. We have currently 2 networks open, the kindergarten readiness and the high school graduation. So let me introduce you to the conveners today. Sandy Simar is a Head Start and Early Head Start Director from Families First of Minnesota. And Amanda Lasik is the School Readiness Coordinator, also from Families First of Minnesota. And then we have Chad Campbell from Boys and Girls Group of Rochester leading the high school graduation network. Welcome, Amanda, Sandy, and Chad. So let's kick off this conversation. Amanda and Sandy, Can you share with us a little bit, why is being a part of the network important for meeting the needs of youth and kids in our community?
Thanks, Claudia. I think I'm going to start, and Sandy will catch me at the end here. So our network is comprised of many groups that lead early care and education around the community. And what we've learned from being a part of that kindergarten readiness network through Cradle to Career is that collaborating helps to align our efforts, just like what Julie talked about. I didn't know that slide was going to precede me, but to align our efforts across programs and really to better serve the community, to support children and families. One example I want to highlight is that recently a really exciting thing that our network has accomplished is that we've been able to gather data from 28% of 4-year-olds in our community to look at whether or not they're meeting developmentally appropriate milestones. Now, the data that we have gathered at this point is mid-year data, so it doesn't tell us where they are, but it was a trial for us to be able to pull it at this point, and it tells us a little bit, but the really exciting time will come in the spring when we are able to move forward and look at that data and really be able to see with those 4-year-olds that are in all of those community partners that are in our network, and be able to use that data to inform the work that we're doing moving forward. That'll really be we are able to take that data and we can disaggregate it into different demographics. That'll help us to be able to see where more resources need to be allocated and how we can support different sectors of the community. During the pandemic, we as a group and collaborative action, we have seen Cradle to Career support our own families and our community in so many different ways. I know personally our organization has benefited from the devices and Wi-Fi access for families during distance learning, food boxes, and other emergency relief efforts. But ultimately, just using the collective impact of having all of these partners together and making data-driven decisions through the networks like the Kindergarten Readiness Group just brings communities together to create solutions for better outcomes for all children and families. I'll pass it to Sandy.
Okay, good afternoon. Well, this is really exciting. Amanda and I are just so fortunate to be able to work with such a great network. The people in our network are really committed to the success of children and to work across programs. And so one of the things as I was looking back as part of the theme was that we had an amazing opportunity to look at to ask the question, what is the most important of our network members regarding kindergarten readiness for children? And so each network member voted individually through a Menti system to say what they thought was the most important indicators across school readiness domains, which are the domains that affect the whole child: physical, social, emotional, cognitive, and creativity in the arts. And the really amazing part was that as the network members selected what they thought was most important in those domains, and we got to the end of our getting the data together, the amazing part was that the social emotional development was a theme that ran through every single indicator that the network members selected. So it really helped us understand how important that was to all of our members, and also how important it is for our children and our community. And that happened before COVID. And so since then, we've just really galvanized around that idea that social emotional development is so important for our children, especially now. And I think that was a real turning point as far as having real unity about what was important. And looking forward, we're really looking forward to, as Amanda talked about, the data collection, for us to expand in early childhood, other programs to come and join us and bring their data with them, so that we can have a larger percentage of the children, the 4-year-olds in our community, to see where they're at. And also to the opportunity to expand with Cradle to Career's help, other programs who are interested in using the GOLD child assessment tool to really help support them through coaching and supporting them through training. Because even though we're looking at this so exciting about where we can really start looking at where our children are at as a whole, to look at population level data that we can turn the curve on, the most important part of this work is that using an authentic assessment tool that's research-based makes a difference for every individual child, because the teachers have more support in really helping determine with the parents what strategies need to be in place in order to help that child to reach their full potential. So those are some exciting things that we're looking forward to. And I just want to thank all the Cradle to Career leadership and the community for supporting these efforts.
You're muted.
Okay, so that's about all, unless Amanda, you had something else to add to that?
Nope, I think I'm good. I think Claudia is working on, oh, there she is, unmuted.
Yep, now back. Tech issues, but so Amanda, you mentioned that the network was working on some efforts to bring kindergarten readiness to all. Could you share a little bit of what the network organizations are doing and looking forward to piloting soon?
Sure. So as Sandy had talked about, as a network, in the first year that we were together as a group, we spent time picking indicators to focus on as a community. And through that work, as we have continued to look for ways to support the community, one idea that is, again, close to being executed here is that we have put together activities that are family facing. So for any family in the community to be able to access that also align with these goals that we have listed up. So there's a variety of different activities and they fall under a variety of those domains that Sandy was talking about. But for example, I know one is showing parents why playing a game like Follow the Leader at your house, which literally you need almost no specific resources, and why that is an important game to be playing and what skills that would teach your child and how those will help set them up for success when they get to a setting like school. So we're in the final stages of getting those cards to a place where they will go in front of a couple of parent panels within our network, and the parents will be able to give us feedback before we roll them out officially to the community.
Thank you, Amanda. I am unmuted this time. So thank you so much, Amanda and Sandy. Chad, good to have you here with us today. Could you share with us about what you as convener, as a network partner, have learned this past year through your clients and the partners themselves on the network?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say that I speak for each individual organization that Julie listed on the previous slide, but I think that through our conversations in the network, I think we've really touched on a number of things over the past year, and I'd specifically point out that through our experience at Boys and Girls Club and through our conversations in the network, some of the things that we've been facing as a network and as I think a community during the COVID-19 pandemic have just been these impossible choices. So one of the themes that we discussed at our last couple of meetings was that we've really seen a massive community-wide disengagement from teenagers in all aspects of the educational and youth development spectrum, and that's something that we're almost universally struggling with and trying to figure out how do we combat that as we try to work towards improving high school graduation levels, and in particular eliminating gaps in those high school graduation levels. A disengagement of high school students does not bode well. And so this is, and as we started to grapple with that, one of the things that we've identified is that each of us as organizations and as I know that the school district has struggled with this as well, have had to make some tough choices around how do we serve the immediate need for to reduce and mitigate academic learning loss during a distance learning period, and the disengagement from academics that comes from that, while also understanding that there's a massive mental health crisis bubbling up as a result of the social opportunities lost when social distancing becomes the universal norm. So trying to manage both of those things for our organizations has been massively challenging, and we've been learning a lot about that. And I think to speak to what Sandy brought up as the Kindergarten Readiness Network discussed what their most important indicators were, our conversations consistently lead back to the importance of the social emotional aspect of youth development, and that there are these really impossible choices to make between the academic focus that we sort of reflexively turn to in a time like this, where kids are not going to be in the school building, they're not going to have one-on-one time with teachers and tutors and things like that, but that equally important, and potentially, I think some would argue more important, is the loss of the social development that goes along with that. I think some of our teacher colleagues and educators from the school district maybe put it best when they said, when we went to distance learning, we kept school and we took out all the fun parts. And that's really made it really tough on kids. And that's what we're seeing certainly in our organization at Club, and in our conversations with the network, that's what we've been hearing. So I think that's one of the key learnings that this particular past year has brought. Now, of course, we've been working on other things during that time as well. So, when we met in person a year ago over some delicious food at John Marshall, delicious communal food, one of the things we shared was that we were emphasizing our focus on building cultural competency within youth workers community-wide as a key strategy to improve the engagement of youth, particularly youth of color, in order to help reduce the gaps in graduation rates. And we continue to work on that. We've been working in particular most recently on our measurement strategies. So you heard kindergarten readiness colleagues talk about their measurement strategies. Similarly, on the high school side, we're working to develop some measurement strategies, and working with local experts from Winona State and others and the Diversity Council to put together those plans so we can measure at the same time that we're putting together some development opportunities that we can then offer to the organizations in our network and to the staff within those organizations to help cultivate greater cultural competence, which we believe will increase the overall sense of belonging of youth of color in our community and in our organizations, so that they can have higher levels of success as they define success.
Thank you, Chad. As we put this year 2020 behind with its good things and its bad things, what are you looking onward for 2021?
I'm sorry, did you say there were good things?
Hey, you work with us.
That's right. That's right. All the best things of 2020 have been our conversations. So as we look forward into what our next steps are, so obviously as we finalize our measurement strategies, the key next step is to put together specific development opportunities for organizations. So these will look like professional development for whole teams and for individuals, we hope, within organizations community-wide. And that if those things are successful within our network, then I think there's the potential that those could become more widely adopted even outside of the high school graduation network. And then obviously, you know, I think that the beautiful thing about something like Cradle to Career is the next step from there is to say, okay, we've got that rolling. Now, what other strategies can we use to mitigate the graduation disparities that we're seeing? And so we've started, in fact, at our last meeting, we started that conversation to say, okay, what will be the next strategy when we're able to put this one into a successful routine? Then what will be the next strategy that we'll move to? And I think that you know, the things that I just talked about will inform that pretty heavily. And this is just me speculating, so don't take this as gospel. But I think that some of the things that may come out of this will be us looking back at what have been the impacts of 2020 and COVID-19 and social distancing and distant learning, and how can we help to overcome whatever barriers have been placed in kids' way, on top of the barriers already faced, you know, in 2019 and prior. And how do we respond to those to help, number one, those kids most directly impacted, you know, this year's seniors, this year's juniors, those kids who have some help that might be needed to get back on track. And then, of course, what are the structural things that we can do that have the longer term future in mind to remove long-term barriers and get kids on track, you know, overcoming the structural barriers that we know exist in the community and in the system.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Sandy. It is for me really a pleasure to get to work with you. On that note, Julie, I'll turn it to you to talk about population results.
Great. Thank you so much to our conveners, and I hope you're taking in the chat. There's just a lot of great chatter about how the work that you're doing is so important. And that's what I just want to pause for a second is to say that the conversations that are happening within these networks, this is that alignment, this is that coordination, that is those arrows coming into alignment to make the most impact as we really think about what is it that system, like what can we do both together and in coordinated efforts, but also how can we identify, like what Chad said, those systematic barriers that are holding many of our kids back, and how are we really collectively looking at making those changes going forward? And that is what these, you know, conversations and this work of the network is driving us to do. And so when you look at this chart in front of you, this is the 7 network results that we have, and the 2 bigger circles are the networks that are open. And we are in the planning process of thinking about what the next network will be. But as you hear, I mean, there's a lot of complexity of bringing these partners together and starting to really think about those coordinated efforts. And so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what the population level results for each of these circles are telling us from 2020. So early childhood education, early childhood development, one of the indicators that we're using right now as we're waiting for this network to open is around screening. So when children complete their education screening by age 3, it allows 2 full years for activities and or interventions to set them up for success in school. So if you look at the chart, what the chart's telling us is that of the kids who entered kindergarten this year, 41% of those kids were screened by age 3. So what we're really hopeful is that you will take this message and you'll share it with your Facebook and your Insta followers and tell them, if you have a child who is under the age of 3, make sure that you get their early childhood screening done by the end of age 3 so that there's 2 full years for interventions, or even just time to learn about those areas that your child or the children in your life might need a little bit more support. And those 2 full years will make a big difference, because this is what Amanda and Sandy have reminded us as well, is that each child is on their own journey and they develop at a different rate. But these are markers, early markers, that will help us help that family get the resources they need to help their children in their own unique educational ways. So at the kindergarten level, you've heard from Sandy and Amanda, so I'm not going to retell you what they've already told you, but I'm going to emphasize 2 things. It's so vastly important for us to have a common definition for kindergarten ready, because we don't have a national kindergarten readiness definition. Oftentimes it's by age. If your child is 5 years old, they can go to school. And so we understand that we want to set kids up for success in our community. And so that's why, if you look at the next slide, that is full of the population level results. And don't worry, this is a lot to digest. You don't need to digest it all right now. We will send out a link later after this that will take you to our website, in which you can see this in our full annual report. But this is so much different than what we had last year. Remember last year when I had this slide up, it said data under development. In 1 full year, 1 year, this is how our network has come together to go from data under development to really looking at prioritized standards that cut across these 6 domains of learning, and really give us a full, holistic picture of our children. And again, to remind you, these numbers were pulled on our 4-year-olds in November of 2020. We will look at these numbers again in spring, but isn't it so cool that we can do that? That is a huge win for us. We're looking at local data. We're not guessing based on national data. This is a picture of our kids. Pretty cool. And I appreciate Sandy and Amanda's leadership, and every single network person who, a network partner who is contributing and being part of this journey with us. Our next slide is a little bit different. It's a different story, but I also think that where there is no data, there's also questions and there's opportunity. So this time last year, yes, Chad, we were having a communal meal and it was delicious. Boy, we didn't know much. But a mere 7 days from this day is when our kids went into distance learning, and a couple of days past that is when we went into our stay-at-home order. With all of that, our governor canceled our Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment Tests, our MCAs. And these are the 2 major measurements that we use to measure 3rd grade reading and 8th grade math. But what I ask is, well, is this an opportunity? Is this an opportunity to think about how we can localize our data again? And really, is a high stakes 1 day, 1 snapshot test the best way to measure 3rd grade reading and 8th grade math? So we're starting to have conversations with one of our biggest network partners, Rochester Public Schools, around their concept of proficient, standard-based grading, standard-based learning, and also within that proficiency-based grading. And there might be ways that we can boil down to prioritize standards, just like we saw in the kindergarten network, to really think about what's the fuller picture of our readers right here. And to remind you, just like you want to tell all your friends to get their kids screened by 3, remind people it is imperative for students to be reading at grade level by the end of grade 3, because that's when we stop learning to read. And by the beginning of 4th grade is when we start to read to learn. So academically, we are systematically setting kids back if they're not at grade level at the end of grade 3. So that's something that we can all remember, and that is a message that we can take forward. So our next slide is high school graduation. What you're looking at here actually is last year's graduation rates. So much like COVID has paused some of our work, this is the week that usually the high school graduation rates are released, and they have been postponed. So But really the story here is what Chad had talked about. You know, if you look at this on the surface, well, 86% of our students are graduating with their 4-year cohort. That's a pretty good number. 93% of our students are graduating within the 7 years that they have to graduate. Well, that's a pretty good number. We could stop there, but they don't, because they dig into the data and they recognize that there are still gaps. Systematically, we are graduating our Black students and our Latinx students at a lower rate consistently. And so what can we do to help them reach their highest potential? And that's why the strategies, the systematic changes that our network partners are making are so important. So we thank high school graduation for not just staying at the surface, but being willing to dig deep together to find better ways to serve our kids. Which brings us to our next slide. Again, it's a mixed story that we're looking at here. So we track post-secondary completion. We want to make sure that kids are completing and not just enrolling. The 52% of young adults graduating from Rochester Public Schools attaining that college degree or certificate within 6 years of high school graduation, that is of the students who stay within Minnesota. So we don't have a way to track quite yet all of our students as to when they leave state to go and pursue their dreams and their aspirations. But even within this, usually we're able to disaggregate this data into subpopulations. But the numbers were suppressed this year, and that makes us ask questions too. Is it that we didn't have enough numbers in the subpopulations? Is it that kids are deferring their education because of COVID? Is it that other life has gotten in the way because of COVID or for other reasons in which they are no longer pursuing or staying within that post-secondary to completion? So we have a lot of questions that we're asking there, and we're asking those in partnership with our higher ed friends who are asking the exact same questions and working tirelessly to try to make sure that they are creating education settings that are good for students. And I'm going to pause, take a breath, and really focus us on workforce participation. So oftentimes people ask me, well, what age does Cradle to Career end? And it's less about age and it's more about stage. So we really want to track our students and our youth through to early career when they're starting to get into their first career. And this is an interesting data set in the fact that we know that 40% of our students who graduate in our region stay within our region. So this data set is the 40% of graduates, 55. So just over half of those who stay in our region are earning a livable wage. And this is really important because we talk a lot about economic mobility. We talk a lot about economic autonomy. How am I equipped to make choices about how I'm going to invest in my community with my time and my talent? And how am I best making decisions about industries or places to work when cost of living and a livable wage here for a single person, one person in a household, is $28,000 per year? And this is from the Department of Education or of Employment and Economic Development. They have a tool, a cost of living tool that you can actually play with and see how much money you would make and you would need to make in our region for basic needs. And only 55% of our 40% that are staying here in our region are earning that livable wage. So we as a community can do better. We as a community can start to ask those questions. If we want to retain the best of our workforce, or of our potential workforce, and really grow and have a blooming community, what are ways that we can make changes now to make sure and ensure that more of our kids are earning a livable wage when they enter early career? So there's a lot of information in 45 minutes, and we're not done yet. So, stretch out, we're still going. Always in these community reports, we want to make sure that you know where we are in our population levels. We want to know that you know what's happening with our networks. And we also want to know that it's always an open invitation for you to join us. Again, Cradle to Career, it's a community-wide, community-owned initiative. Our backbone staff supports the work of the community, the expertise, those programs who tirelessly are pivoting their programming to best serve their families and their students. That's who we work for. We work for you. And in order to continue to work for you, we need more of you. We want more of our youth serving organizations to join High School Network and noodle on those big problems with us. We want more of our early childhood education friends to join our network and to consider how can they also implement gold strategies or something very similar. So always we want you to join us. And we have 4 very specific ways that you can join us right here on the screen. So we use, in addition to collective impact, we use a framework that's called results-based accountability. It's a disciplined way of thinking and taking action. You can use results-based accountability on getting up earlier in the morning all the way to systematically changing the way that kids enter kindergarten ready to learn. And it's a common language that we want to use across our networks, and we invite you to come and learn more and learn how you can also implement RBA principles, results-based accountability principles in your life, in your organization, in your programs. The second ask that we have of you is we like co-creation here at Cradle to Career. We want to make sure that when we are creating research projects or we're creating data collection cycles, that we're doing that in collaboration with those who are in our focus groups. And we want to make sure that we have an ethical boundary set when we do this work. And so we have a research code of ethics that if you attended in October, you might have learned from our intern Sag. And we are now working on our data code of ethics, and we would really love to have your input on that. And it's a quick survey, and the link is provided there. We can also put that in the chat for you. The third thing I talked about, support your local learner. We want to do deep dives, especially as we start to go into summer. We know that summer slide is something that happens every summer, but it definitely has been blown up a little bit with COVID. So we want to make sure that parents and caregivers of students really can dive into those resources on our website and ask questions of the experts. And so we're going to do a series in which we deep dive support your local learner from grades K through 3. And so our first one will be April 29th from 4 to 5. We will have a Facebook Live link for that. And this one will focus on kindergarten. And the last one is Midwest Bank has partnered with us. They have chosen us for their cause of the month. And so we have partnered with them for the month of March. And so we're very excited about this because they will be matching any sort of donations that come in for us on the For Giving site. You can use your iPhone or your smartphone, and you can snap a picture of the QR code there, or again, we can put the link in the chat for you. Oh, look at that. Thank you, Kelsey. It's already there. Every dollar helps, and the dollars that help, they help us support the work. What makes Cradle to Career different? 3 things. 1, data. We are data-driven, data-informed. We want to make sure that we're telling our story and not relying on somebody else's story from somewhere else in the world. The second thing is through this facilitation and this neutral facilitation and the administration of these networks, we want to make sure that they feel supported, that they are valued, and that they have the support and trainings that they need to do the work that they do. And the third thing is that it is, like I said, community-wide, community-owned. We want to make sure that everyone has a part to play in the success of our youth, because that creates the sort of community that we all want to live in and that we all value. So join us in these 4 different ways. We have investors who have, go ahead and go to the next slide. Amy, that would be great. Oh, that is not formatted the right way. I apologize. We'll fix that and we'll put it on the website. We do have investors across the community, but also from our nation. We are invested in by Strive Together, our national nonprofit, our Education Partnership Coalition, and the state of Minnesota. And so there, we have multiple lines of funding that come in, but your funds are also put to hard work in these ways. And with that, I want to thank you. We have 10 minutes in which we can entertain questions if you want to put those in the chat or raise your hand, and we can definitely answer any questions that you have. And thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of this community. And thank you on this beautiful day, a giving of your time. No questions? None. Thank you, Guy. Thank you so much for being here and for being a partner from the beginning. Planning team for the win. Well, with no questions then, friends, I would say let's take 8 minutes back on our day and go enjoy the sunshine. If ever you have any questions or you want to learn more, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'll put my email in the chat. I love a virtual cup of coffee and a social distance one as well, or even a walk in the sunshine. So don't hesitate. I always love making time to chat about the important work that we're doing. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.